Okay, well, the first thing I want to do is welcome everybody to this, the fourth lecture in the 12 lecture series. And this is a very difficult lecture, I have to tell you, extremely difficult. Because Native people, in understanding their history, do not cover up the difficult parts. They put them in their place, and that's what we're going to talk about today. We've seen the beauty of the creation story. We've seen the beauty of the birth of the twins. We see their struggle. We see how the Tuwhiskaron, the right-handed twin, reigns over Daliwadewin, the dark twin, and brought us to this moment. We see how our people were part of a huge migration that took place over thousands of years, right through all those beautiful cultures we saw, the Mayans, the Aztecs, the Anasazis, the Cahokians, and then landing in our beautiful land, which is filled with forests and waterfalls and just very rich resources and a lot of natural food and natural architecture. We were able to live on the landscape without building a thing, even though we knew we could build something, and eventually did build a long house as a memory of the sky world, not as a creation of let's say, quote, an architect. We're architects. We, as many cultures, didn't have architects the way we have them. We like to think, for instance, the Parthenon has an architect. I just finished reading a fascinating book on the Parthenon Enigma about how it was designed. There were many people involved in the design. Many people. So they can identify a couple of them, like Ictinos, but not really, because it took quite a long time to build, and they went through different architects, but the architects all picked up the original instruction, like we did, to build a long house. Now, once our culture is settled and we're doing Thanksgiving and living a very natural life, something happens. And it has to do with the men. And this is a tremendous lesson for our own time when we think of the imbalance between men and women and the terrible heritage of men today, creating wars and power struggles and sexual abuse. It's just rampant, and we don't know what to do with it. We can't keep throwing each other in jail over it. We have to help each other to heal, and this is what the Iroquoian culture did. So I'm calling it cultural devolution, when something is at a nice point and it devolves, because history and culture can devolve. And there is a very real possibility we're in a devolution right now. Think about it. A devolution, too, it is inevitable. It can't be stopped. It's like a natural force that takes over. And we know that every great culture has met its demise in time. So as to say, we aren't meeting ours in this time. Of course we are, because everything that is born has to die. And this is what we need to teach each other and why we have these stories. The dystopic shadow of Iroquois. Now, we talk about shadow in psychological terms. We know what that is. Jung described it for us very clearly and told us that we were marked in a culture with a shadow, and that each person has a shadow. I have a shadow. That becomes part of this story eventually, you'll see. But this is our shadow of Iroquois, and we knew what it was before the settlers came because it was part of our storytelling. The next great story and the next great chapter in Iroquoian culture comes in the next lecture, the great law of peace. This is an astounding teaching by a spiritual messenger who was beyond Iroquoian. I'll tell you his story next week, but he brought us a beautiful message about how we're supposed to live together, and we still live the way he taught us 1,000 years ago. We have undying respect for it. But when the story of the Great Law is told at Six Nations, and we're required to tell it every other year in September, it takes 9 days. And it's a wonderful celebration. It's exhaustive because the elder who's delivering it, he can only speak for so long. He usually starts at sunrise and goes till about 2 in the afternoon. Then he has to go back home and refresh himself, and to engage with the ancestors in that quiet time. So he tells the story properly. It's a great duty. And my chief, Jake Thomas, was one of the finest speakers of the Great Law of Peace. And I was with him in his preparations. I was with him when he was actually reciting the Great Law for us. I was at 2 sessions, and I'm very, very honored. I didn't know how incredible it was. But the first day is the scary day. It's called the scary day, and it's the cultural devolution. And, they say maybe we better ask the children to leave for this part, because it's quite gruesome, and maybe we shouldn't expose them to this part of our history. But they can stay if they like. What is it? This is a period in our history when the men became predominant. The fact is, the women aren't even in the story, if you can believe it. They were ignored completely, even though they carried the children. These men created a culture all to themselves. Sound familiar? And they did what despots do today. They murder and ravage, and in our case, we were cannibals. And we ate each other. We ate particularly our enemies who were our friends in a soup, which was delicious. And it allowed us to take on in our minds, the power of the person who was being eaten. We're not the only culture that had that, but we had it. The other thing is that the most fun that the men had, if I can call it fun, is war and killing each other. And we have men all over the planet right now who just love war. We don't actually do anything with them or think about them or even interview them. They love war. And if they kill another person, they couldn't be happier. It's like killing an animal. And that's the way we were. We saw each other as animals in the forest. And it was all about the predominance of the fittest. And so Iroquoians were extremely fit as warriors and extremely attractive as well. This is a painting by Robert Griffin. Now I'm going to show you Robert Griffin paintings. I told you he is an artist from New York State who really seems to capture the essence of our culture. But it's post-colonial, post-settler. So, for instance, in this beautiful painting, you'll see he has silver breastplates. Those silver breastplates are gifts from the British Crown. And we wore them quite honorably. You can see them in museums. The most beautiful and prominent one, the one of Joseph Brant. It's at the Brant Museum in Burlington. It was given to him by King George III, and he wore it with great pride as an ally. And of course, we had body decoration and tattoos. A lot of piercing. Piercing of the ears, and you can see here the ears in this figure are all cut out so that they can take decorative silver ornaments. And I don't know about you, but I've seen young people with ears that were taken out just like this. They're not Iroquois. I don't even think they know the heritage of the pierced ear. But here it is, 1,000 years ago. And the body decoration, the tattooing. This is only the beginning, this painting. And the roach, shaving the head. They would pull the hairs out so they wouldn't come back. Pull them out. It was very painful. It was like we have today waxing, body waxing. It's the same thing. But we did it in a brutal way of picking each hair out. Brutal because it's painful, but we always suffered the pain with great honor. And the more pain, we would have songs we would sing while we were going through the pain. And it was considered honorable to sing while you were going through this defoliation, so to speak. And that's not to mention the rest of the body, because the warriors fought naked, as the Greeks did. So it was very intimidating when settlers came, coming from a very colonized Christian environment that had a lot of restrictions around it. And here you have people running around naked. Well, they were proud, and that was who they were. But at this period of devolution, the women weren't in the picture. The men stopped doing Thanksgiving. They didn't do any ceremony at all. They just loved roaming the woods and doing, masculine things, which includes things like bravery, killing, eating each other. Now, two of the most horrifying practices, which we know, is their, I don't want to call it torture, but when they capture their enemies, and they were fierce warriors, what we call guerrilla warfare. And the Iroquois taught the Americans guerrilla warfare during World War II, and it was one of the things that won that war. And we remembered it. My uncles were in World War II, and they were some of the teachers of the Iroquois guerrilla warfare practices. But this is 1,000 years before that. We were doing guerrilla warfare, and one of the practices was to take your fist as you squatted over your, we'll say, captive, and plunge your fist into the captive's body, which you can do. You can do that. And it's a practice the Mayans had, too. You just plunge your fist into the chest of a man, and you can, we knew where the heart was, pull the beating heart out, because we could see it pumping, and then raise it up to the sky and sing. Of course, they died. But that was our trophy. Then, in the end, you would take that body like you would an animal and more or less reduce it, flesh and skin and muscle, into a soup. And this is when all the children go, ooh, but, we did it. And the elder says, we did it. We did it. This is our heritage. However, we did grow out of it. We don't do it now. Now, I've got these strings here, and this is going to help me get through this difficult story. We have the ceremony Thanksgiving. We have its opposing ceremony, which is, let's call it a yin and yang. One is a yin and the other is a yang. The yang is the condolence. I guess you've heard that word at funerals, condole. They'll say, let's condole him, which means to honor him with speeches, or her. Mostly men, because the condolence is directed at men and the chiefs. Because we're most concerned not with the condition of the chiefs, but with the conditions of the men who are free of the responsibilities of being a human being, which is a man. A man does not bear children. A man's life is not as important as a woman's life. It's just the way it is. And they're expendable, and they know it. And so they have to be humble if they're truthful to themselves. Now, here on this rod, I was explaining that, in fact, when the condolence ceremony is done, mostly for someone who's come out of of this degraded kind of lifestyle. Let's say you've been in prison for mass murder. Well, we would take you out and give you this ceremony, basically a prayer to heal you. And then, you would come back to the village. You couldn't participate in the village anymore. We will take you, we will feed you, we will give you a place to sleep, but you cannot speak again. Anyone who has experienced the things you've experienced will never be the same and is apt to repeat the things that they did. So, in a sense, they didn't really believe in healing, but they did believe in taking care of the people, and this was one of the ways they did it with the wampum. Now here you'll see there's 15. There are, you can't count them, but there are 15, and you'll see they're made like all wampum of 2 colors of beads. That's all we had, purple and white. But look how many different variations there are. Remembering that computer technology is based completely on a binary system like this. Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. A million yes, no questions gives you your answer on a computer. It's crazy how simple it is, but we had this 1,000 years ago. We understood the value of 2 things working together. There, for instance, this string, later in the condolence, it begins down there with the eyes and tears. But here we're getting into the more advanced part, and you can see it's all white. It means you've been healed. Good mind. There is no darkness in you. And when they give this speech, which I'm just running through in a very light way because we'll come back to it, the first string down here is for the eyes and tears. Fear, loss, and sadness. Your fear, your loss, your sadness, and your disconnection. You are disconnected from us. And we want you to reconnect. Next, we think about your ears. The war cries and shrieks which you let out. Quah, quah, was horrible. And when settlers heard the quah in the forest, they were scared to death because they knew the warriors were coming and that they would be brutal. We were very brutal when settlers came because they were taking our land. We had no problem taking their scalps, no problem killing them, no problem adopting them. And then the third one, the throat. The confusing words and the primal screams which you let out. Your words don't make any sense. They're very mixed up. And then your stomach. Your cannibalism and the taking and eating of human body parts. The scalp, the beating heart, the vital organs, the fingers. They love taking fingers. And the taking of animal life with dark gratitude. Which means when you kill an animal, let's say a deer, you don't offer any gratitude to it. You just go for it. That's not right. Then 5, the red stains on the seat. When you sit down in our longhouse, there's so much blood on you, you're going to leave stains on the seat. The earth, the water, the beds, and the mats of the longhouse are all stained with your blood. 5, you are covered with darkness. The darkness of night put you in a culture defined by black. Black. The black of the flint, the black of the coals of the fire that's left over, all things black. Even black tattoos. Then we say 7, you lost your sky. You forgot creation. You forgot the star-lord. You forgot our eldest grandmother, the moon. And you forgot to say Thanksgiving, which is our original instruction. So you've lost your sky. At 8, you've lost your sun. Your sun is like a total eclipse of the sun, when the light of the eldest brother is blocked out completely. And it happens in our culture from time to time. But when that blackness comes, it's like you're a black shadow on our culture. The grave. You make continual visits to the place of the dead. That's not right. When the dead are put in the ground, we leave them and we don't even mark the spot. But the fact that you have to continually visit to be with those spirits, it's not good. It means you cannot disconnect from the place of the dead. That's a real curse. And then 10, the council fire is destroyed. You scatter our fires, put out the ashes which connect each of us in our communities, our family, friends at home, the ones that we mix together in our ceremonies. You scatter them. You get rid of the ashes. Then 11, the faith keepers. That's what we put out. We have the faith keepers go to you first. The faith keepers are really the assistants to the chief. They are the ones who watch over the ceremonies and the people visiting our community. They maintain the strength and power of faithful ones. And then 12, nieces and nephew. These relations will come to help you. The nieces will come, the nephews. And then 13, bad medicine. What we're going to call moral idiocy. Suicide in all its form. The inability to see between right and wrong or to see the consequences of your actions. Addictions and indiscriminate violence. These things all affect our society today. And they were recognized 1,000 years ago by our ancestors as something that needed to be healed. And last, the notification of death, because you're going to wake up to what has happened, and you're going to return the light or torch and be good again. This is a very deep reprimand, all held in these strings, which we still use today. Because when one of our chiefs dies, it's a terrible moment, and they're freed. They're freed from their life in a body, and so we do this speech over them to protect them from evil. That's how we protect the chiefs, and the chiefs aren't raised until they've been given this speech. So they remember what a moral idiot is. They remember the scattered fires. They remember the blackness. That's the depth of our culture. Profound. This is a very famous painting. I've forgotten the painter, a Dutch painter, of a giant eating a dwarf human being. This is a European painting. Desperately hideous. Here's another European painter by a Norwegian Odd Nerdrum, which to me expresses the absolute horror of the white race for itself. These figures sitting there under a sky, screaming of the primal scream. His paintings are all about this dialogue of the curse of the white race. They're not very popular because they're very tough, but they're beautifully done. Now, here is a book, The Taking and Displaying of Human Body Parts as Trophies by Amerindians. It's a book written by anthropologists, and believe it or not, they asked me to write the introduction. Partly because I was Mohawk, and partly because I understood our culture, and they wanted my reflection on the fact that my relatives took human body parts. Now, I wasn't afraid of it. A lot of people were so offended, Native people especially, by the fact someone's addressing this, because it's the settlers reflecting on our deep past that's very dark. And we figure, no, we don't wallowing in our deep past, but if they're going to do it, so they asked William Woodworth to write the introduction. And it took a lot of soul searching. And one of the things that came to me as a direct personal experience, I was in the U.S. military in basic training for the Vietnam War. So I was among warriors, but I'm not a warrior. But I was among them, and one of my commanding officers, platoon sergeant actually, had done 2 tours of duty in Vietnam and was very proud of killing Vietnamese, and very proud that when he killed one, he would cut their ear off, and then he would string it up. So he brought into one of our training sessions a string with about 20 ears on it. I killed every single goddamn one of them. I mean, they use that kind of language. I said, wait a minute. It's the Vietnamese, they're lovely people. Like, and you're using that as war trophy? You're more primitive than my ancestors ever were. That's what I'm saying. So I wrote that in the introduction, that I am not ashamed of taking human body parts, but it was a part of our past, not our present. However, U.S. settlers still practice it, and I experienced it in the Vietnam War training. So look at that. If you want to talk about somebody's taking and displaying of body parts, talk about your own. I've never read anything about what I experienced there in that training session. So now look at this. I don't know whether you remember this exhibition called Body Works. I was going to look up the name of the artist here. He's with one of his quote objects. He's German, and he developed a method to inject human cadavers with wax and then strip the skin off and display it as an anatomical, object. Well, when you're in a room filled with these, it is horrifying. I didn't like it, but people were fascinated. And they are not native. They were fascinated by the flesh stripped from the body. And the fact is that my ancestors used to do this, used to strip the flesh from the body of settlers. And they would laugh while they were doing it. And they would expect the person being tortured to laugh too. You can see this portrayed in a beautiful film called The Black Robe. It came out maybe 20 years ago. The story of the Jesuit priests visiting the Hurons in Ontario. And it was a very popular film. However, it culminates in an event here in Ontario, which I don't think the Catholic Church has ever forgiven us. Up in Midland, we had a war party that went up to the Hurons who were Christianizing, and we killed 2 of the Jesuit priests. Brebeuf, I'm sure you've heard that. Lalonde, and we stripped their skin from them and burnt them over an open fire in a place which I visited on a railway track up there. And now, of course, they made them saints of the Catholic Church and they have their own church. But for us, they were our enemies. And I am not ashamed. I went to visit the Jesuit priests and, to have him say what he wanted to say to me about, the martyrdom of Brebeuf and Lalonde. And there it was. I'm in the picture. Oh, my God. But that taught me a great deal about this chapter and this dystopic quality that men have had. Now, you will notice that native men today, this is the native man leaving behind these qualities. This is the native man condoled. And I think you will notice today that native men are very quiet and very dignified. And when they are tortured, let's say by the police or the RCMP, they just take it. They take it because they've learned to be gentle men now. And they've remembered, the story of how our people used to be. And they're afraid of their own anger and power, so they get very quiet. Native men especially are known to be quiet, extremely quiet. Myself, just a little aside, I would be in rooms of elders, and oh, was it quiet. They didn't speak a lot. So I said to them, I feel out of place because I talk a lot, and I'm filled with enthusiasm for the things you're talking about. Oh, Bill, you know why we're quiet? What they did to us for hundreds of years. That's what's made us quiet. All our people used to be like you. We had wonderful talking sessions filled with vibrant love and fun, and now look at us. Just a bunch of quiet Indians. I am telling you the insider story. It's very important that you hear it, I think, because Native culture and Native issues are a living story. And I'm telling you what's actually happening in that story. It's not what people say. You know, like the Native chief that recently got beat up by the police for having a license which was invalid. I mean, why me? I'm driving near my reserve. I mean, big deal. Get down, we're going to beat the hell out of you. And they did. And they made him bloody-faced and disgraced, so he had to go back home to his people as their chief, now a wounded man, wounded by the RCMP. This just happened a couple months ago. It's a living thing. Now, I'm showing this part here because this is part of the story in the Great Law, where we have to leave behind the story I just told you. I call it facing the shadow in the contemporary use of language. The examination of the forms of human degradation, degeneracy, and devolution as addressed by the encounters of our spiritual messenger, Deganawida. And I will tell you this story next week, what he had to confront when he first came to our territory and it was so degraded. The first event is the encounter he had with the cannibal and cannibalism, and the taking and displaying of human body parts in the exigencies of a warrior culture, and the making of the soup near Oswego, New York. That's where the story takes place. But we were a warrior culture, as we are today, as the United States is, for instance, a culture completely dependent on fighting a war all the time. That's a warrior culture. That's not Canada. Unfortunately, we're next to the warriors. We're kind of like the women. We have to stay at the side or we might get hurt, if I could say so. Canada's a very feminine country. You can tell this by the buildings that portray the government. The Americans have a temple in Washington. What do we have? We have a house. The Houses of Parliament. A house. And when you're in Ottawa, it feels more like a house than it does a temple. Then there's the attempt to actually kill Deganawida. The Mohawks did it. And that's why we're called the people of the dark blood and the flint. Because we actually tried to kill, it would be like trying to kill Jesus. We tried it, but we were fooled because this messenger was not going to die. And he didn't die, even though we threw him over the cliff at Cohoes Falls, where I've been numerous times. He lived. He lived, and they found him the next morning at a campfire, putting smoke signals in the air to say, "I'm okay. Will you accept the good message I'm bringing?" And they were the first to accept it. Then we have the encounter with male unwillingness to assume deep duties on behalf of peace, and that is Hiawatha. Deganawida needed an assistant. Again, I'll tell this story. It's so beautiful and romantic. But Hiawatha had lost everything. like many people do. He lost all of his daughters and his wife, and he was sad. And Deganawida found him in the woods, crying, wanting to die. And Deganawida said, I need help. Don't kill yourself. Help me. And I will give you a condolence. That was what I just reviewed with. And you'll be healthy, and then you'll be able to speak for me. And that's what happened. Then the last story is the engagement with the tyranny of phallic worship. This is a tough one because, you have to be careful. You're telling these stories around people who might be offended by it, but it's just the way it is. I mean, in the Onondaga Territory, the last people to accept the Great Law was their leader, Tadadaho. And he was very much like tyrannical leaders we have in the world today. All they think about is wealth and sex and power. And that's what he did. And he had his people scared to death. So what Deganawida said, listen, those people will not accept our good message unless the Tadadaho does. So let's go to him. What are we going to do to calm him down? Well, let's sing to him. So they came singing in the woods, and they brought a clan mother as well, which he was not familiar with. And then they started combing his hair. It had snakes in it, in his hair. They had to comb the snakes out, and more or less gave him the role as the head chief of our confederacy. He is the fire keeper, and that's what he does today. We still have a Tadadaho, even though the title was created 1,000 years ago. It's a living title. And then finally, the encounter with the total eclipse of the sun. The eclipse of the cosmic source of life, our brother the sun, in Seneca territory on a specific date that we say is the beginning of our great law. And we're able to trace it through archaeoastronomy. We know it actually happened. Okay, so I'm going to move on to something very different, very different. You see, what we've done, we've looked at the dystopia, we've looked at the healing of it, the attempt to heal it, and then we've learned how the dystopia has come down to our present day in the great law of peace, which I will be teaching next week, or next lecture, let's put it that way. Now, I think we should take a little break, because the next two parts of the lecture are personal. They're a description of things that happened to me to clean me up as a human being. And you could think, well, maybe I'm a nice guy. Do I need cleaning up? Absolutely. Because when you're with elders, you really have to be pure. And they have to test you. And they have to help you. And so that's what I'm going to describe to you next, is a traditional native healing of one William Woodworth, who, in a sense, didn't think he needed healing, but was advised that he did. So that was advised by my elders. So I went ahead with it. Okay, so we'll take a little break and we'll switch gears for the next part.